Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is David Paris, and he's going to tell us about his near-death experience. Hi, David.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. Um, I was at the beginning of COVID in New York City in 2020, in March 2020. I got COVID just when it was spreading all over New York, time when one in every 250 New Yorkers died. So it's something people don't know. And I was pretty close to being one of them too. I was thinking at the time, we thought it was only older people that were sick, and I thought I was gonna be fine, and I did get sick, and I thought, huh, that's odd. And back then, you couldn't go to the hospital. There were no tests. I had a virtual visit, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you can breathe. You're totally fine." But actually, what we didn't know at the time is you could be fine for a week and sick, but you could get worse, and most people got worse after 8 to 10 days. So after my eighth day, I definitely went from, as anybody's experience, from very sick to suddenly I couldn't breathe. And I passed out in front of my refrigerator one morning, woke up an hour later and thought, yeah, something might be wrong here. But because I wasn't sick, I took a taxi, where they said I didn't have COVID. And the very first moment I got to the hospital, they they immediately put me in a wheelchair because I almost passed out as I got in. They said it was a very common thing. People would just hang on, hang on, hang on. And the moment they get to the hospital, everything would fall. That's what happened to me. And I was just like, oh, wow, I haven't been breathing. It Once they put oxygen, they put me in a wheelchair and they put oxygen in my nose, I guess it was, or a mask. It's hard to remember, something like that. But I remember the feeling like, oh, that's what air feels like. It was uh, really startling. And at first, they gave me a test and they said, yeah, you have it. And I was 5 days getting worse and worse, but I didn't know it because anybody who a lot of people have the same experience. We hallucinate quite a lot in that time. And I remember fighting off people around me, and later I found out there was nobody around me. They were
Was
isolating
that
people.
was that 5 days in the hospital getting worse?
Yeah, I was
After
5 days
your
in the
eight
hospital.
days, you already had it home.
Yeah, 8 days was 5 days, and then they said my lungs were all black. And they said, yeah, we're gonna have to intubate you. And at the time, I didn't know all these people who were being intubated died. Like 80% of people who were intubated died. But I was confident, because they said I really at the time I thought only older people died. So when I went in, I said, just wake me up in time for the jet game, for the jet draft. I was very excited for the Jets drafting the offensive lineman, and it
Oh,
was in a few days. Oh, I hope I don't miss the draft. And a month later, I woke up thinking it was just a few days. And apparently, they put me on not just intubation. Apparently, after one day, I was about to die, and they put me on an ECMO machine. That's the kind of thing that they use
oh,
when you have heart surgery, and does the work of your lungs and your heart. And that saved me. There were 16 machines there. I was 16th patient, so it was like that close to not getting it.
wow.
And when I woke up, they apparently I had my heart stopped 4 times in the beginning, the first few days, and people 1/10 as sick as myself died, and that was a bit of a miracle situation. But it's funny, when I woke up, I had all first of all, this reality we live in now, and I think a lot of people have near-death experiences share the same thing. It's like it's just very weird because this reality, when you live in the other reality, I guess in that in-between place, you step back to this place and this doesn't seem real. The other world seems real,
Hmm.
and it's very difficult to come back to this. And I know a lot of people with NDE experiences say that, and you don't want to come back. The other place is way better. And I felt that way, but then I also remembered, like, in the way, sometimes you wake up and you have a dream that you can remember, and you'll remember even years later that moment of a dream. I had a number of dreams I remembered instantly. It's all kind of dreams. They're like, where I was, like, they it I was completely conscious, like that whole, even though they was intubated, I remember all that world, and I remember struggling and fighting to live. And sometimes there were things like my dance partner, my ex-wife, we were salsa dancers, we were America's Got Talent finalists. We were like very big, and she played all of our shows. And then I had all these beautiful dreams, not in the beginning, more near the end of like, dancing and having a great time. I was like, oh, I don't want to come back to this world. It was really interesting. And but no, I remember the times where the very first moment I was like, oh, I was in a theater and there was a theater, just me and this Buddha-like figure on the stage. And you know how like in dreams you suddenly just appear somewhere and the rest of history you don't really know, but you're just there. I was there and I thought to myself, it still brings memories when I remember this thing. But when I saw the Buddha was told me you're dying, you're dead. Like not even dying, that's it. You're about to end. And there was an exit sign to his left. It's like that's where you're going. It's funny, like that world is all you experience it through images, It's
Uh-huh.
not quite this world. It's different. But it still has remnants of this world. Like so it was a theater. It's like theater's life and there's death and I remember like all my life I've had panic around death. And the moment I start just thinking about obliteration, I get panic attacks. And if you know what that's like, it's really horrible. And uh, and I had one. I remember thinking, oh my God, this is the moment. Instead of having a panic attack, this is the real thing. I'm about to go. And I remember pleading with the Buddha. It wasn't quite a Buddha, it was like Buddha-like figure, so a little warped in its face. I said, listen, no way. Like I pleaded for my life. And the Buddha, what I felt the level of love and compassion definitely was a spirit that like, and he didn't have words for me, but he drew a painting off the side of his mouth, a crescent moon, which was just expressing the compassion, that understanding I wanted to live, but he was sorry I was going to die. And when I received that message, it was just so clear to me that no, I refused, like I'm not gonna do it. And I remember not doing that. And I had to fight. And I got the message, wasn't like words, but I got the clarity from the spirit. The spirit said, all right, we're gonna give you a small little sliver chance to live, but you're gonna have to fight harder than you ever have fought in your life for longer than you ever had in your life. And when you're at death's door and you want to live, you do what you have to do. And then for like, I can't tell you, for like, it hurts to think about it still. It's like 4 years ago, it still hurts. But I had to like I had these visions of being in the ocean and fighting for swimming to live as I see boats in the distance and just having to push, and we're being in a field alone for like what seemed like 1,000 years. And it was I mean, I suppose I have a fighting spirit that wanted to live that made it happen, or maybe it's good medicine in this world that made it happen, or there are a lot of people praying for me, could be the prayers, but whatever it was, it did bring me back. And, it's funny, as scary as it was also quite a bit of a spiritual experience because up until that moment, well, it's been a spiritual experience in many ways, I should say, but one of them is to that moment, I never felt complete as a human being. I always felt like I needed to achieve something, whether in high school and I did, high school, I wanted to be a football star, not the biggest star, but I was captain of the team and did good stuff. And college, I threw it all the way. I said, I want to be a spiritual master. And I studied religion and went to India and studied all these gurus. I was just always trying to achieve something. And I wound up giving up that and then became a school teacher. And in as a school teacher, I was like wanting to be the best teacher. And I was pretty good, but not the best. And then I went as a salsa dancer, also not very good, but I fought hard. And then I actually did partner acrobatics and did some would say I was very successful. We performed around the world. We were semifinalists, America's Got Talent. But I was always on a life of seeking something, whether it was a romance or accreditation. And I remember feeling that way. I guess Zoe's my dance partner. She was playing music. She was playing a lot of music for me in my coma. And I remember the moment where finally I've been searching my whole life, and this spirit gave me a chance, or this energy gave me a chance and said, okay, we're going to finally give you what you've always been searching for. And it was a diamond in the bottom of the world. So I took that diamond and all I had to do is bring it to the top. I was like, oh, fantastic. But it says, on the way, you're gonna have to run over people if you're gonna do that. I said, no problem. I ran over everybody. I took that card to the top. And I was so excited because I've been searching for this my whole life, you know? And the moment I brought it to the top, there's this other spirit, it's an Indian spirit with a sword in one hand and some energy in the other hand. And with that sword, he cut me in half. And then I knew there that it was a cutting of my ego. And it was the biggest gift I've ever got because he showed me, at the other hand, like Krishna did Arjuna, all the multiverses of what exists. And I was humbled with the greatness of what is in that moment. I don't know if it was the delusion or the drugs I was in, but it felt like it really was a real experience for me. And from that moment, after waking up, I was completely healed from this vision, from this constant searching. Maybe because it was like spirit, maybe it was like because when you if you experience death and panic, which sometimes it's panic, sometimes it wasn't, sometimes it was pleasure, but when it was panic, you experience that all of your preoccupations in a material world get like pushed away and you seek connection on a deeper level. And it seems absurd to be so obsessed with an egotistical version of the way you want to live. And that was forever healed for me. And maybe like 80% healed. And then between 2020 to now, I think it's completely healed. I don't have that incompleteness anymore. Um, yeah, I just realized I talked pretty much for 10 minutes straight, right? I should probably check in.
No, that's okay. I was just listening. So you saw a lot of things. Yours reminds me of other people that had NDEs due to COVID. It's so similar. I mean, different things you saw, but almost, I don't want to say dreamlike state on steroids, but very
Yeah,
visual
that's right.
and
That's right.
creative, but yet it
Yeah,
had personal meaning.
very much, very much. Yeah, like I did hear about a whole bunch of people, and they almost all of them say the same thing. And again, we don't know whether it's the drugs or whether it's COVID or whether it was I don't know, but I do know the experience was rich. It was like it's what it's a little hard to be in this world now. I've had to fight really hard these 4 years to make my life meaningful because when you live in that other world, it's so complete and so and what you said, right? It's rich. It's vivid. It's way better. It's just way more interesting and connected. And you don't have that isolation you experience here, nor the disconnection. And back, yeah, coming back to this world, it's hard. It's hard. I've had to fight hard to redo my life to better match what that other life was like, so I can exist here. Because otherwise, it's not the other world's better, you know? So it's just been a fight to say, okay, what can I do in my world now to match that?
If I understood you correctly, you had a lot of panic about the thought of death prior to this, but now you feel like death's not so bad.
Yeah, it's funny, it goes two different ways. Like definitely before it was only panic. I've had some spiritual experiences that sort of make me think like something exists. And but then whenever before I had my near-death experience, yeah, any thought about obliteration or what that reality would just send me into panic. And I remember I remember when I woke up, I guess like maybe the first 3 weeks or something like that, I felt such a depth of grief. It was just grief, and I just cry a lot. So much the nurses were like, you got to stop crying. I was like, all right, I pull a sheet over and keep crying with my
The
sheet
nurse
over like
told
this.
you you got to stop crying.
Yeah, all the time.
Wow.
It wasn't once, yeah, it was quite a bit. I love my nurses. They were great, but they didn't really have much attention. Well, because it's the same thing as a kid, you know? You tell a kid or baby, you think you're helping them by telling them to you the assumption is if you have someone not cry, then they're not going to be feeling their pain, right? And you could snap out of it. And to some degree, there's truth to that. There's sorrow that if you get stuck in, you do need to snap out of it. But I can tell you for sure that was not my situation. I've never been one to over dramatize my pain. And this was, I was only scratching the surface in those first 3 weeks. But, my point was more that, during those 3 weeks, I did fear panic a little bit. Um, but it was more that fourth week when they first had me, because when I woke up, my whole body atrophied, so I couldn't move. Like the most I could do was wiggle for like weeks and weeks and weeks. And but after the fourth week, maybe it's the fifth week. Yeah, fourth week I think was they finally got me to stand up. Um, and then I started having panic for the first time, and it was similar to the panic I'd experienced around death. And it was a pretty cool thing. I got assigned a psychologist, and the psychologist happened to major, or her thesis was on people who experience falls, and then how to handle that trauma for them. And and then she was able to explain to me, what you're experiencing is just fear, and you don't have to run away from it. You can actually face it. And with her help, I was able to face my terror. And it was associated with physical terror and then connected to death terror. And in facing it, I could really embrace that. It was weird because that whole time when panic would set in, it just felt like I had to run away. But when I finally embraced it with the help of the therapist, yeah, it really just, I noticed my body. I stayed present, as per her instructions, and didn't notice that the thoughts were just thoughts and anxiety as opposed to what was going on in the present. And just this one little thing she says, she's like, "Do you really know one way or another what's going to happen?" And I go, "No." And it's like, "And is it helpful?" And I go, "No." And just that little tiny bit of knowledge and facing it helped me, for the first time in my life, just take terror off the board of my fears. And that kind of transformed my relationship to death to, well, that I could actually ask the questions without stimulating a panic attack. And then in doing that, I still believe that now. I do have what I consider spiritual experiences and sort of a confirmation of something else, but some days I'm not sure and I get a little scared, but I embrace those feelings and thoughts when they come, and eventually found the peace of, not knowing one way or another, and then just embracing what I can control, which is a lot. There's a lot one can control in the experience of one's life. But the death anxiety, some philosophical perspective of not being able to control it, with also the actual experience of embracing it and being close to death, kind of freed me from having that fear anymore. And I don't carry that. And I have friends who tell me, well, that's because you were connected to a higher spirit for so long, and because you have that connection, maybe you're not. I don't know for sure.
How about
That's
because I was
said.
just dead and that's a shock?
Yeah, some could be like once you experience that, they're like, oh, I know what death is like. It's not all that bad.
I mean, it's a
You know?
shocking thing to accept. I know at 25, my second NDE, I didn't have that word death. What'd you say? Death anxiety. But I was scared. I had nobody to talk to, but I was scared because I got three kids at home and I just died. And I had lost my twins in my near-death experiences, pregnant for twins, ectopic. And so I suffered in silence, but I suffered. I was scared to death because I had just died. I was so shocked. And then I was pregnant again right away. And so I was scared. I'm going to die. I'm not going to get lucky again like that. But yet I couldn't go get fixed to not get pregnant again or birth control or anything because I wanted a baby that bad. But yet again, I was so scared of dying. I did not want to leave my boys. I was just in this big dilemma all by myself. And then I
Yeah, I know
miscarried
from
that
other
one.
people, they say that they get pulled back, and especially from family and kids. I didn't have kids, so I didn't get that pullback, and that was kind of estranged from my family. So, and even my closest person I was to, my ex-wife, even though we didn't talk for a long time, and I kind of I didn't have that same pull that you did, that many people have, to come back for that reason. Mine was just the my own ego not wanting to let go, because I do enjoy and did enjoy life quite a lot and did want to do a lot of things. I didn't want to let it go. And that was my motivation to stay.
And I think people don't understand that about death, that when you're dead and you're on the other side and you think it's final, even though like a decision could be hanging around there, what's going to happen with me, it's it's scary. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, I wanted to stay. It was so beautiful." It's like, I don't understand that
No, I
because
didn't
I was
experience that. I
25. I
experienced
wanted to
snow.
live.
No, yeah, I had, it was not, I wouldn't recommend. Yeah, mine was not, oh, I saw God or anything like that. No, I saw obliteration, and I was panic stricken. I don't want to go, even I don't want to think about it, because I go back there and it sets me in a really tough place. But yeah, that's a horrible experience.
I think I know what you mean when you say that word obliteration, because when I started writing my book and I was writing about the drowning, and I sat back for a minute and I was like really focusing on what that felt like to be out of my body at 5 years old. Um, and I thought of all the places I went here and I went here and I did that as this ghost kid running around. And all of a sudden I felt like I was dissipating. And you say that word obliteration. It was like that. Like I was like going into obliteration. Like I was so fragment into so many pieces, I was disappearing. And like I just like had to grab the table the computer was on, like, whoa, get back here. And that has been a little fear, quiet fear of mine. And I think that is, just because I'm into ear doesn't mean I don't have any fear of death, because I do. It's that panic that you will just disappear, that maybe
Yeah,
the NDE is so temporary, a final, aha moment. We only, because we don't know what happens next if you stay dead. And so it's that fear of that maybe for those few hours right after death, we have the experiences, all our memories and dreams and these things. But then what next? Do we obliterate? Do we
right,
disintegrate?
exactly, exactly.
That is my anxiety and fears. Like
Yeah,
we,
mine too. That's what I'm talking about.
okay.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. But it's and that's always been something that's a panic off for me. And yeah, I hope it doesn't come back, because it's not pleasant. But my own pathway towards handling that has been just embracing that terror and feeling the terror in the moment, and then letting it dissipate, because I don't know, even though and I'm not 100% sure of the logic behind it. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I know it's tied into when I was first walking for the first time and falling and just getting my balance again. And I realized that, oh, I have the same terror with wanting to just not be hurt and not fall. And so I was able to kind of associate, oh, when I have this terror, it's just my body saying you don't want to die, which is great, or you don't want to fall. And in this moment, I'm actually not falling. Let me look around. Like if I embrace and that's like a trauma thing, right? You don't get caught up with what happened in the past, you're getting caught up with the present, and the anxiety in which death anxiety pulls you to something that's not in the present, that's actually not useful. And there's still a little glimpse. I was saying, well, shouldn't we get scared about what might happen and go into obliteration? And the answer is we don't know, right? We don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
To me, there's evidence that there's spirit, and it won't be this particular form, but we'll see, And with that kind of philosophical background and the sort of like the perspective of it's a natural thing to fear death when you're in that panic, but if it's not happening now, there's just so many better ways to live right now than there is to be having that fear. Something about that settled with me. I can't say I 100% have the words as articulate maybe somebody else has, or I'm close, I think. I'm not quite. But I guess, when people hear me speak, they go, wow, he's a little out there. I'm trying to explain it. But I will say that, like, I've moved towards a place where now I don't have that fear anymore. And I know what you're talking about. I did have that. I think that 10% of people, if I read correctly, have a similar experience in that on a regular basis. And it was quite a gift to finally experience the near death, and that to some degree, either when I went out, either before I didn't hit obliteration, I hit a consciousness there, like right before going out. But I do remember there's like two things. One, pretty sure that world does exist that's out in between or whatever spirit world. I'm pretty sure it exists. And if it does, great. There's nothing to worry about. And if it doesn't, I also know what it's like to spend a month in consciousness where some of it was dreamy and some of it wasn't. And in the unconscious, that's actually not something necessarily to fear as well, because the experience, this is what a lot of people say, Stoics say this. And, it's funny, I went into probably 2 years of philosophical study on death from different religions and philosophy and such, and studied because I was like, I got to understand this. It was
Yeah.
important to my, uh,
Yeah.
and, and, and after 2 years, I didn't, after 2 years, my conclusion was the same when I first got in the hospital, which is you don't know one way or the other. So you might as well let it go and experience. And just having that, and does when the fear comes, it doesn't come to me the same way. I'm sorry, I'm probably rambling a little bit.
No, you're fine.
All I'm trying to say is I'm trying to be clear about it, and I'm close. Maybe check in with me a year from now. I might have the exact words, but something moves forward where I don't have that fear anymore.
It's not easy to talk about or to express in words. And when I first started talking about it, I found it embarrassing to talk about because I was judging myself, how I sounded talking about such things as what we do when we talk about our NDE. This sounds like crazy words coming out of my mouth. I'm used to it now, but and Raymond Moody, all his years of studying NDEs, he says he's still a skeptic. So I think it's
Interesting.
okay that
I'm
some people
probably
have
there.
all the
Yeah, I go a
answers. I
little in
don't.
between.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's kind of where I'm at. I actually don't experience. I share my people ask me all the time, "Oh, did you see God?" and stuff like this, and I was like, I don't. I saw a spirit. I don't know about God, but and people for me, they're all fascinated to hear the stories. They every time I sit somebody down, nobody's ever called me. They're all curious actually, and it's like uh I just had people even want to hear more. I wrote a recent book, a book of questions, and my friend of mine just reviewed it and was like, "Oh my God, it's so clear that your near-death experience has opened you up into asking these questions, and thank you so much for sharing it." And I don't know, for me and my community, they welcome everything. They all want to know. They want to know.
that's
They all
good.
want to know, and yeah.
Is your book published?
Well, I self-publish it. I was saying earlier, I had to find meaning, right? So the first thing I had to do, sorry if it sounds like a commercial, but first thing I did is wrote this book, COVID story, because this was
Okay.
2020, and I'm not selling it. Anybody who wants a free copy, just email me at info David
Oh,
Paris
wow.
Books. I get them out for free. Yeah,
What
I
email
wrote it
can,
because
what email do they contact you at?
info at davidparisbooks.com.
Okay. I'll put
And,
that in your
I give them
description.
away for free. I just want, it's a funny read. It's uplifting. If you find me a little interesting, that's kind of the fuller story. And I wrote it, while I was deeply depressed right after I got out of the hospital. Because at the time, people were saying, "Oh, COVID doesn't exist." And I was like, as far as I could tell, it does. And wanted to share the journey, and I share the spirits, and I share what it was like to be a acrobatic dancer and suddenly not being able to move, and there are funny stories in there. But yeah, and then from after that, I had to really search for meaning. So yeah, I wrote 24 books these last 3 years. um
What?
yeah, they're all self-published. A few of them sell quite nicely because I turned into a social emotional learning teacher. um that it's mostly curriculum books. They're not that hard to write, but it was just I had time because I went back to school for a year when it was virtual. And then when it was in person, I was like, yeah, I can't really do that right now. And so I just put my time. I was a social emotional learning director at the largest middle school in Brooklyn. And I found a lot of meaning from that. But I couldn't go back and do it poorly. It's like I needed to get my knowledge out there. And put out a good book that like sold 3,000 copies so far and
Wow.
has changed. Yeah, I wonder like to some degree whether I'm accepting death more because up until then I've always been searching for, some level of what's the word? Not acknowledgement, but achievement. And to now, even though I have all these accolades before, post-death, producing a bunch of books and doing what I consider artwork, that for me is far more and I'm actually at peace. And I was like, I did what I could as an artist. And as an artist, you don't need to achieve something. You just need to live out your expression. And when I found meaning through expression and meaning through connection, that healed something into me because I used
Mhm.
to try to achieve something for the sole purpose of my own glory. I swear that spirit cut me right in half and just cut all that nonsense right out of my ambition. It was ambitious before, and I'm still ambitious. I still want to go back at America's Got Talent. I still have a whole bunch of more books to write and things I want to do, but I'm not. My self-worth is not tied into it. And if I die before that, a friend of mine died about 2 years ago now. I was at his deathbed every day for like a month, and he's older. He's 85, and I couldn't believe it. He taught me something too. He taught me that last little bit. He said, "Dave, I'm ready to die." And I couldn't believe it. It's like, what do you mean you're ready to die? I love you. I want you to spend more time with you. And he goes, my body's old and it's ready to go. I can feel it. And I did I'm going to stay on a little bit to settle my affairs. I'm going to go. And that's what he did. He stayed on to settle all of his affairs. And the moment he said goodbye to his last relative, he died an hour later. And I knew he taught me he wasn't afraid of death at all. He was always someone who just sought knowledge the way it is and sought life the way it is. And when his body was telling him it was time to go, he was comfortable with that. And he also had done so much in his life that he didn't feel like he left things on the table. And I feel that way too. Like if I still have a lot I want to do, but I did a lot, and so I think part of being more comfortable with death is being comfortable with the way you live life.
I think that's true. Had you wrote books prior to your near-death experience?
No, I only wrote one. I happen to have, I swear it's not, I happen to have these here. This was the one book I wrote called Laughable Legends. I wrote it because I was a middle school teacher for 20, English teacher for 20 years. And I got these um, kids don't like reading much. So I was like, I tell good stories. I get these kids to hear my stories. What it'd be like to write them. And then one New Year's, made a pact as a New Year's resolution. I was going to model the same thing I wanted them to do to achieve their resolution. I'm going to write a book. And like every day I would talk about messing up and how I was like, I would share all my struggles and then everybody would share their struggles. It became a super bonding experience. And then I knew I needed to lead this group of students to achieve their goals by achieving mine. It was kind of like doing this community. And then that set me into like, I know that because I do life coaching, that when you have either an accountability buddy or a community, it doesn't either is fine, and you check in and you're open and vulnerable, so much more is possible than when you do it by yourself and just like blame yourself. And so that was my first book, and it sold not so much, 700 copies or so, but it showed me because I started doing partner acrobatics and competitions and such when I was in my late 20s, but I was in my late 40s when I wrote that. And I was like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do this much longer. I need to find something else that I enjoyed. And I found joy in doing that, like whether it's sold or not, as an artist, I felt great by doing it. And that got me hooked. And then when I woke up, I was like, all right, this is way more meaningful than what I was doing before.
Yeah. I do a lot of things I'm not good at just because I enjoy them.
Yeah, that's funny. I've been spending a few hours a week juggling for the last 2 years. I'm terrible at it, but I do not
Juggling?
even necessarily. Yeah,
Huh.
because I'm a circus performer, and you know what a second act is for a circus performer. It's
What?
when your first act is not good enough. You need a second act, and so yeah, so I've been trying for the longest time, and I make incremental progress. I'm probably my teacher said I'm a intermediate level or probably advanced beginner level student after 2 years. And he's patience for me, but he's also like, yeah, you don't learn too fast. But persistence, right?
Well, it sounds like you learned fast being at that level in 2 years.
No, no, intermediate student level, no, not professional level. Like
Oh, okay.
I can do I have the I can do like some basic things and stuff like that. You know, anybody who if you're gonna do a show, you need to be like 100 times better than I'm doing. But I'm working towards it. I'll get it by the time I'm 60, I think.
I bet you're entertaining at a party between acrobats and the dancing and
I
the
have the
juggling.
entertainment down. I can juggle people. I can tell a good story. Juggling
I bet you're a fun
clubs, I'm not
teacher.
so good at.
Are you still teaching?
Yeah, I love being a school teacher. I've been a school teacher for 25 years and um yeah, definitely that's meaningful and but it can be tough too because the system is not so set up. Like I moved from being an English teacher for 20 years to then I made a deal with my principal. I was like, look, I'm going to do something more meaningful. So I became the director of social emotional learning there. That's when I got all these ideas. It's like we have to teach students not just the specific skills, but you know, what does it mean to be resilient? What does it mean to you know, handle friendships and what does it mean to connect to your thoughts and how do your thoughts connect to your feelings and then your actions? What does it mean to, you know, all the whole list. There's if anybody's curious and that just take a look up social emotional learning. There's amazing stuff going on there. And I was like, oh my God, I did a little bit of that, but then I went full heart. And then I found there wasn't the right curriculum for it. And then when I woke up after not before I was working for a few years on putting the what I thought is like, you know, some social emotional learning curriculum, or what adults tell kids, is they preach to the kids. And I always say, if you could preach to a kid and they would have listened already. And then you wouldn't need to preach. They already had it. So what I set up is like theater games, camp games, and then through the camp games, kind of extract what was as a community, what did we learn from it, and then push a certain skill over time. And that I found to be really meaningful work. But as good as it was, um, if it's not everybody doing it, it's sort of seen as just an aside thing. And I want to see all the schools not just have it, you know, they sort of like at best they may say like, all right, let's do this one period a week. And but it's good to take those lessons and then spread it across all the lessons. And I was working with my school and we did a bit of that. It was good, but I want more. Like wasn't enough for me.
I never heard of that. Social learning. That sounds interesting.
Social emotional learning, the
Okay.
acronym SEL. But yeah, if you
Huh.
look it up, it's a movement in you know to meet the needs of you know the inner and outer needs of, you know, and it's true that when your social environment's better, the learning environment's better. When people can there's such a deep link between your community working together or yourself working. Like we need to look at how our mind works so we can figure out how to learn better. And as like you check in with somebody first, you have that connection, you have them self connect, the whole meeting will be different because you spend that SEL time. And it's beginning to catch on. It's most of the instruction, in my opinion, is terrible because nobody really knows how to do it. It's being led. The teacher-led stuff is great. I like my curriculum. There are a few other people I think that do a good job, but it's a hard new field to bring. But it's happening. There's interest in it.
Hmm. When I was in high school in the 70s, I was in all the home ec and sewing and cooking and parenting and all that, everything I could get my hands on that was like teach you to be a mom. And I don't know if schools still have that kind of stuff or not.
They don't, there's a call to action about that. You know, it's funny, like the more I've been in the school system, I can just speak to New York City. I don't think that exists anymore because they think it takes away from academic instruction. And the thought behind that is, oh, let's, you know, prepare kids for college and so forth. And whereas, you know, I went to college not knowing how to cook. That's it, you know, and or
Well,
so what were those things you listed?
I thought no matter what career I have, I'm going to be a mom, and that's something I want to be good at. So that was my
Right.
logic. I ended up, fostering 60 kids and adopting 10, so it come in
Are you
handy.
serious?
Yeah. In the
Oh, you're
sewing
amazing.
class too, I
I didn't
got a
know that.
job in my 20s as a seamstress. Um in tailoring tuxedos and suits and stuff at a fancy clothing store. So, yeah, come in handy.
There's some functional. The school would be better spent if it's more functional, and then also kind of what I was talking about with talking about how to work with other people and work, make know yourself better so that you can be a dynamic, full, expressive, thoughtful human being. And it's not happening right now, but I'm trying. I'm working at it. I'm trying to push along that vision.
I'm sure nowadays, especially being in New York, it's a lot different than where I'm from, but there was nothing to help kids look outside the box as far as careers. I mean, everybody knew about nursing, and they knew boys would go work at factories and or the coal mines, and the girls were they'd take classes to they call it BOE, business office something, to be secretaries. I'm like, I don't want to be a secretary, and that's what everybody was doing, was taking these classes, learn to type.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because to some degree, if you study education, there are these movements that help people get jobs coming out of high school, but then also sometimes they would be pushing people into those programs that maybe they could have did something different. And so there's this weird, interesting balance of when is it appropriate to help someone get functional skills getting out of high school that, or when are you holding them back by doing that? And that's sort of the way things get stifled when it comes to vocational and specific home ec schools,
Yeah.
home ec skills.
I ended up doing social work and counseling and stuff, but I retired from that and I went to work with my husband on the pipeline. That's his helper, and he was a welder. And I'm like, my gosh, I'm making man money now. I've been making women money my whole life. Why didn't I do this right out of high school? Why didn't somebody tell me about this
Exactly.
welding?
Exactly. Yes,
I mean, because some of those guys are
absolutely.
making more money than the judges and lawyers where I live. So
That's right.
I don't know. And we would go move around different campgrounds, and people thought we were trash. And the people there, the workers would be like, our campers are worth more than their houses are living in. They think we're trash. So,
It's a lot
yeah.
of ignorance.
But so yeah, it's been really interesting. And oh, your spiritual experiences. I meant to ask you about that. Can you tell me some of those? What that's been like?
Yeah, well, it depends how you define spirit. For me, spirit is connected to a higher force, and um, I could tell that I have a renewed connection to believing in something else that then feeds me. It's gonna sound funny. Like, when you have intuitive things that happen and you're like, huh, this seems to be from some spirit. Just today, I went to Enterprise because they overcharged me. And then it's by $75. I got that $75 back. And then 2 minutes later, I get a email from Zipcar that I owe them $75 more or sorry, $82 because I had a speeding ticket. Now, now your mind, I mean, it's trivial, right? But in some ways, it's funny because I'm a little more sensitive to the way the universe works. Like, I'm just trying to see the spiritual message there.
Yeah.
What's supposed to happen? And I say that as a joke, but not as a joke, but something that's like light, but I constantly see is more connected to the way what I perceive as the spiritual law that happens around me that I wasn't as connected to before because I was just only focused on ambition. And once my ambition was, um, you know, really severed with the sword, I would call spiritual awakening waking to the potential of something bigger than myself, the desire to connect to my community rather than just push my um, own ambition. And then live more connected spiritually to myself, to know myself more in a way um, that allows me to achieve more peace as opposed to always feeling like I need to do something. So if you call that spiritual, then I say yes, that's a spiritual
Okay.
experience for me. Some people would say, short of seeing Jesus and telling Jesus telling you something, maybe that's not spiritual. But for me, yeah, these are spiritual things.
And this is still so fresh for you. I mean, it takes, I think they said average 7 years to process your near-death experience. And I mean, but you guys are fortunate that you know what a near-death experience is. There's all this information out there. Like, at 25, it was 1986. I never heard of it. I thought it never happened to anybody else before. I mean, like, my first thought back in the wheelchair after my NDE was, this has never happened to anyone in the history of the world. It's my exact thought in my head. Because never heard, couldn't imagine like this would ever have happened to anybody.
Yeah, I feel like I'm really sorry that you had that isolation there. And I know, like, I hope I shared, like, I had a therapist at the hospital that helped. I go to therapy once a week, sometimes twice a week for years. Now it's once every 2 times a week. I've been blessed with all type of spiritual consultations to help process my experience. And most of all, every single person, when I expressed my depressive moments, really went through severe depression for 3 years. And there's not one person who didn't give me the space. They may not have understood it from a place of really knowing it, but they gave me the space and the to have my experience that I never felt. I didn't feel the way that probably even 20, 30, 40, or throughout most of history, where people, when you suffer something traumatic, um, that if you don't appear normal, then you're going to be ostracized. And it wasn't like that for me. I feel very blessed to have had a supportive world and a community for
Good.
this. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. Okay, well, I'll let you go. I know you got a friend coming, and so I'll get this sent out to you later tonight.
All right. Pleasure. Thank you so much. And nice to meet you. And thank you for your time.
You too. Good luck. And
All
bye.
right. Take care. Bye.
And bye.